Too weak, too little, too late. These are the words from the Shadow Home Secretary in response to the statement by the Home Secretary. It's quite a powerful speech by the Shadow Home Secretary, so I'm going to play it in full because it's quite scary that nothing's really changed and that the brutal murder of Sarah Everard could happen all over again. In the Home Secretary's response, he tries to blame his predecessor, saying he was just carrying on their work. But towards the end of his answer, he does actually recognise that more needs to be done in order to protect women. So it's kind of a watch this space to see if they'll actually make good on their word.
3 years ago this Sunday, a young woman walking home was abducted and brutally killed by a serving police officer that she should have been able to trust to keep her safe. So we think today of Sarah Everard, her parents, family and friends who have to live with the shattering consequences of what happened. And this is also a day when many families who have lost sisters, daughters, mothers to violence are here in Parliament to hear my honourable friend, the member for Birmingham Yardley, read out the names of women killed this year. So today's damning report is about women's safety. It's for all the women across the country who worry about walking home alone or who worry about their daughter's safety. And it's also about trust and confidence in policing, whether we have the standards in place to maintain confidence in individual officers and for the vast majority of police officers working immensely hard with integrity to keep communities safe, whose work is undermined when standards fail. So I thank Lady Elish Angelini for her inquiry and this comprehensive first report, and thank those who came forward to give evidence. But it exposes a catalogue of appalling failures in the police vetting and misconduct processes and in investigating indecent exposure and sexual offences. Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer. He should have been stopped, and he could have been stopped from being a police officer. It is truly appalling. His history of alleged sexual offending stretches back so many years, and yet opportunities to investigate were repeatedly missed. And most disturbing of all, Lady Angelini says, there is nothing to stop another Wayne Couzens operating in plain sight. So although I agree with most of what the Home Secretary has said, I have to be really blunt about this. His response is too weak. It is too little, and it is too late. And the lack of urgency is unfathomable to me. The government has been repeatedly warned about failures around vetting and misconduct. Independent and inspectorate reports in 2012, in 2019, in 2022, in 2023, all highlighting serious failures in vetting procedures. That's why Labour called 2 years ago, for mandatory national vetting standards. Forces are working hard, but there isn't mandatory standards for all forces. All the government has done is brought in a code of practice 2.5 years after Sarah Everard's murder, which isn't strong enough. Frankly, it isn't even clear that Wayne Couzens or officers like David Carrick or Cliff Mitchell, both now convicted, would definitely have failed the vetting standards and the code of practice, even if it had been in at the time. He has to go further, and it has to be driven by the Home Office. On the misconduct changes that he's referred to, most of them aren't even in place yet, again, 3 years after Sarah Everard was murdered. So will the Home Secretary now commit today to a new mandatory framework for vetting underpinned by legislation that all forces must abide by? We will support him in doing so. That will pursue any evidence about past domestic abuse or sexual offending, not simply convictions, and at minimum, would he just accept recommendation 6, which looks at a review of indecent exposure allegations and other sexual offences recording against serving police officers? At minimum, surely he can accept that today, now. And on automatic suspensions that he's just announced, again, does not go far enough. Only suspending people for criminal offences once they have been charged? Well, once investigations are being launched by the police into serving police officers around domestic abuse or sexual offences, those officers should be automatically suspended. And we have called for this again repeatedly. He is not going far enough. And as for the response on wider women's safety, it is also frankly too weak. I welcome many of the individual policies the Home Secretary referred to and that they've introduced over the last few years. Most of them are things that we called for. But again, it's nowhere near far enough. On indecent exposure, we have known about the awful murder of Libby Squire in 2019 and the failure to take indecent exposure seriously enough. Libby's mother, Lisa Squire, and the Home Affairs Select Committee Chair have been campaigning for stronger action on indecent exposure now for years. So again, surely he can accept at least recommendations, the first 3 recommendations of Lady Angelini's report around stronger training, guidance and approach to investigating indecent exposure by the police. Surely he can do that. The reality on women's safety is the number of prosecutions for domestic abuse has halved. Yeah. Rape prosecutions are still taking years. Yeah. Early action and intervention just does not happen. And there is a shocking drift on women's safety. There is a shocking drift on what the Home Secretary has said today. I urge him to support Labour's call for new vetting rules, to support specialist rape and sexual offences units in every force, to support Raneem's law so the police respond with urgency to domestic abuse and save lives, and to listen to Lisa Squire, the mother of Libby Squire. We say that this report should be a watershed, but we said Sarah Everard's murder 3 years ago should be a watershed, and far too little has changed. How long must we go on and say the same things? The first Women's Safety March was on the streets of Leeds nearly 50 years ago, and we are saying the same things about our daughters' safety today. And I am sick and tired of nothing changing, sick and tired of women and girls who face abuse and violence not getting support while perpetrators get away with it. Yeah. Enough is enough. Let us have some urgency in the Home Secretary's response. We cannot stand for this anymore.
Home Secretary.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady makes a number of points about the findings set out in this report and also in the issues raised because of Sarah Everard's brutal murder. I have continued the work of my predecessors and indeed the work initiated by my right honourable friend, the member for Whitton, to make sure that the focus of not just the department but police forces around the country and indeed other organisations, statutory and non-statutory, that deal with the safety of women are focused relentlessly on this issue. We have made it clear there is still much work to do, and we will respond, and as I committed to, respond promptly to the findings of this report. I would take issue where, and I understand the frustration that not enough has happened, it has not moved fast enough, there is cultural change that still needs to be driven through, there is a culture of leadership, and I've made it very clear to police leaders, both in force in forces around the country and at the College of the Policing, of my expectation of leadership, not just process and procedure, but those things amplified and supported through leadership and a real commitment to drive change through those forces, and I will continue to do so. I don't think it is right for her to say that nothing has changed. That would be, I think, that would not be an accurate reflection of the situation from the time that she makes reference. There have been a number of improvements, including the first visit that I took as Home Secretary was to Holborn Police Station. I looked at the team that was working there, and there have been improvements. Now, I completely concede that those improvements are not universally applied. The differential performance between forces is not good enough, and I've discussed what can happen to make sure that the best performing forces are, the least well-performing forces match the performance of the best-performing forces. There remains a huge amount of work to be done. And of course, we are not waiting for the outcome of the second inquiry before we take action. But Dame Eilish, in her inquiry, shows that actually whilst of course, we will look at changes to the recruitment and vetting processes which have been highlighted, her report shows that there were plenty of opportunities where the current system flagged problems, and those problems were not properly responded to by the force. Those are not procedural problems, those are a culture problem. So we will absolutely look at what processes and procedures need to change. But I am not going to wait for that report before doing so. I will continue to push for cultural change through society and, of course, through policing to make sure that where issues are flagged as they were, that they are taken seriously, they are investigated properly, and hopefully make sure that a situation like this never happens again.
On a more lighter note, the video that's on screen now has Jonathan Goodis making a fool of himself. Don't forget to hit that like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.